Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Seoul, Korea, and KDI, where we left Seoul 2 years ago, still lingering in my mind. I'm an economist, trained in the US, started my career at KDI. It was 25 years ago. After spending 6 years, I joined the government as a contract-based civil servant. I worked for Ministry of Planning and Budget as a director for administrative reform. And I spent only 3 years there, and I joined back to KDI school. I temporarily spent 2 years as an executive director for a state-owned enterprise. I have my research in government reform and development economics, but also as I worked as a practitioner myself, as a policymaker. So I will share some of my experience, some failure, but some success story with you. I always consider a presenter as a director of an orchestra. I'm a conductor of an orchestra. If I'm a conductor, who are you? Audience? No, the conductor never faces the audience, right? Conductor always faces the member of the orchestra. So you are my member of orchestra. Okay, so please play your own musical instrument. Okay, violin, cello, whatever it is. This is the first violin plays, right? And you should be part of this whole orchestration. So let's make a good harmony for the coming 1.5 hour. Okay? Well, this is the question that I will have to answer through this afternoon session. What is the most needed reform in your government, and how can it be done? Okay? Please try to answer this question now. Okay? Anyone who, let's start from the first question. What is the most needed reform in your government? And by the time that we finish this whole 1.5 hour session, you should be able to answer this question better. But even as of now, you will probably have something to say about that question. Do you like your government? Yeah. Anyone? Oh, yes?
For my country, it would be accountability.
Could you identify your country?
Police.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they always make plans for how they're going to spend the money, but there's no follow-through.
Okay, right. So there should be enhanced accountability. Good point. Other? Yes?
In the case of Korea, the administrative executive branch, I think the power is too unchecked compared to the judicial and the parliamentary branches in government.
The president is too strong, you think?
Yes. So I think related to that question, they are too free to do whatever they want whenever the president changes.
Okay, right. That's why we have National Assembly, right? Parliament. But sometimes Parliament is not strong enough or capable enough to check what is going on in administration side. Okay, that's one of the jobs that professors should do. We speak all the time here and there, something against what the government is doing. Yeah. And others? Yes?
I think institutional reform and good governance and effectiveness, and at last we need some coordination among the government agencies.
Okay. Coordination? So coordination among government institutes. Yes. Government is so self-interested, right? They have their own interest. They try to maximize their own rather than national interest. So there is always a conflict which is not easily coordinated. Yes, that's a problem of all countries, including Korea. Yes. Other? Yes?
Job reform. In my country is Italy.
So you want the government to create more jobs? That's a controversial issue. Yes. Whether government is the one who should create more jobs or not. Yes, in some area, yes, government needs to create more jobs. That's true. Okay. And others? Yes?
I'm from the Philippines. We have corruption and the laws not being implemented efficiently.
Okay, corruption. Yes. Although there is a matter of degree, all countries have this corruption issue. right? And Korea is not free from that problem. We will have a chance to talk about that corruption issue. You know, Korea has a serious corruption back in 1960s and 70s. However, major decisions has not been affected much by the corruption. Corruption was a problem, but it did not distort the major decision. That's why Korea has up to this level of economic growth. Why was it the case? Why corruption did not distort the major decision? I will answer that question later. Okay? Others, please. Yes.
Maybe for Belgium it would be the decision-making process,
Mm-hmm.
especially for infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
because it always takes a really long time to get something approved,
Mm-hmm.
and then by the time it is approved, there's already another government structure in place. So it's very hard to just get anything done.
Okay. Long decision-making process. Yes, that's always a conflict between time efficiency versus democratic consensus building. If you focus on democratic consensus building process, it takes time. But if you rely on too much on efficiency in decision making, sometimes people will complain that their voices has been neglected. So we need a balance, right? Others? Okay. You all love your government? Right. All government, any government is not free from faults. They have their own problem. Okay. So there are a list of things that you want to ask for your government. But what will be the most important reform in any government that can be generally applied? That's something I would like to discuss with you, and what should be done for that reform. I will address this second issue in the second half of this session. Okay, so first I will touch upon direction of government reform and followed by strategies to accomplish that. Why government reform is important? Because it determines economic growth. Of course, it determines a lot of things, but as an economist, I'll have to emphasize the economic growth. Economic growth is determined by three sources of growth, which is determined by these factors. But what determines these determinants? What are the fundamentals? The fundamentals: market efficiency, property right, no corruption. List of these fundamentals determined by whom? Yes, it is the government. It is the government who makes these fundamentals, which eventually determine the level of economic growth. So having a right government is the most important thing for you to have economic growth. Korea had a dictator during 60s and 70s, former President Park. And he's a dictator, but he was a visionary dictator. And many of my African students ask me this question: Professor, we also have a dictator, but why my dictator is doing a bad job, whereas your dictator did a good job? What would be the reason behind that? Just happen to be a good dictator for a Korean case and happen to be a bad dictator for that country's case? It's just a matter of personality issue or personal competency issue of one president? It's more than that. There are other reasons behind that. Okay, that's the government in general. Korean government was more competent, and they could make a right decision compared to the country that we are hypothetically comparing with. So good government is the one who make a right decision, and that decision is fundamental for economic growth. Well, there are three objectives of government reform: lower cost, better performance, and better procedure. And lower cost means less budget, better policy, better service. So there is a direction of it, and these are tools to accomplish that goal. please take a moment to think about which direction is most needed direction for your government. Of course, these three directions are all important. You cannot miss any one of them. But what specifically has to be emphasized more than the other? Please take a moment to think about it. Think about your government. My government is too costly, too many staff, too many people, too many inefficient budget, or policy that they are making is wrong, the service is terrible, or they are not very transparent, or they are not democratic enough. Think about your government. What would be, I don't ask for your answer, but I hope you just take a moment to think about your own government. What is my government right now? Okay. And so based on that, mostly there are, once you set the direction, the next you will have to take the measure to accomplish that direction. Well, there are mostly 5 directions that you can take. First, setting a new vision and mission. You define a new mission of any organization in your government. And then you may introduce competition. You may even introduce competition in government. Please give me an example of introducing a competition in the government. Normally, there is only one government, right? You have, except some country, you have one passport. Somalia has 2 passports though, for one country, but normally there is one passport. So you have one government. How can you have a competition in government? Any example of competition in the government? Yes?
So within one country, I came from China. In China, within China, there are many provinces. So different province, the headquarters of this province, they want to be promoted to a higher position into the central government. So he have to be perfect very well in his government. Also, I should say how to say for a country, for the country's government. So how to say if its policy is not good enough for the talents. The talents will immigrate to other countries. So this is a competition between the country and the countries.
Excellent, excellent. Within a country, when you have different local government, and when local government is empowered enough, they can set up their own policy. Then people can choose where they want to live in. So that's competition. You make your decision by your foot, by choosing place of your residence. There's a competition. Okay? That's why local decentralization is very important to make your government alert all the time. Rather than all power to the central government. If central government has all power, there is no competition because all across your country, everything is the same. You cannot choose where you want to live in. It doesn't matter where you live, A city or B city. But when it is all decentralized, it's different. Living in A city from living in B city. Yes, decentralization is a very important way of bringing competition to a government. Yes?
As well, a competition among different ministries who are fighting among them for the allocation of the budget.
Right, yes. Even though they have different, of course, objective, there is a national priority. So in order to get a higher priority, there is always competition for having the limited natural resources, absolutely, yes. So there is a competition among different ministries. That's why resource allocation should be done strategically based on national priority. Okay? So what other competition we can bring to make your government work better and work harder? Yes?
Performance-based pay instead of simply seniority-based.
That's right. Within the government, yes. Within the government, you can change your payment system, right? Korea, along with Japan, are notorious in their seniority-based pay scheme. It's not good for your, productivity improvement, because people's productivity tend to go down after passing a certain age. I think I already passed that age. But your productivity goes down a little bit. But if you stick to your seniority-based payment scheme, your wage will go up. So after a certain age, your wage is much higher than your productivity. But fortunately, since I already have tenure, they cannot fire me. But if you go to a private companies, they fire you. That's why in Korea, the average age of leaving your job place is 53 because of the seniority base in the private sector. In the public sector, of course, your lifetime employment is guaranteed. So yes, so this seniority based scheme, abolishing such seniority based scheme is one way of introducing competition within an organization. So national level or ministry level, even organizational level, we can bring competition in many different ways. Okay? Well, we have a railway system run by state-owned enterprise. There is a KTX and SRX. These two are competing against each other. So they are providing a service. In order to provide better service with the less cost, there's a competition. Okay? So there are many different ways of bringing competition, even in the public sector. So competition is not is also possible in public sector. I hope you to remember that. And third, empowerment and accountability. You mentioned this accountability issue. Give power to your lower staff so that they own decision, so that they can make their own decision and make them responsible for their decision. Fourth, evaluation and compensation. Finally, change of your culture. Okay. Well, these are the 5 actions to be taken to accomplish a certain goal. Out of these 5, 2 will always have to be matched all the time. If you do not have one, you should not have the other. What are those? 2 should be coupled all the time. Without it, you should not take the other. Okay? Others? That makes some sense. Yes, that makes some sense. But normally the result of this competition is not based on evaluation, but based on the choice of consumer or choice of people. Okay? Yeah, that's 3 and 4. When you cannot evaluate the other, you don't give power to them. Okay? When you give power to the other, you should be able to evaluate them. Right? So 3 and 4 should be coupled all the time. If you do not have one, don't do the other either. Okay? Which of the 2 should be used at the same time is 3 and 4. All right, these are the possible area of reform. Leadership reform, personnel management, performance management, organizational management, anti-corruption and transparency, fiscal reform, and human resource development reform. Well, I used to be a consultant to Indonesian government for 3 years, and these were the list of reform that I used for Indonesian government. So what do you think is most needed reform in your government? So this could be a shopping list for you. Okay, among these, yes?
I'm sorry, but what do you mean by e-government?
It means electronic government. Electronic government has generally is government to government, G to G, means when the ministries are connected through online. And G to B, government to business. when government wants to procure something from the businesses, the business can apply for a certain government tender by clicking the website. That's a G2B, electronic procurement system. And G2C, government to citizen, it is a process of contacting the citizen through online. For instance, when you want to file your application for, say you want to open a bar around here. We need a bar around here anyway. Then you file your application on the website, for instance. That's a government to citizen. Okay? So electronic government has these three aspects: government to government, government to business, government to citizen. Okay? So connecting the other through internet. That's e-government. Good question. Well, among all these, the most important direction of government reform, to me, is combination of all three directions, which is making a right decision. I hope to have a government who makes a right decision. Okay? That's the bottom line. Okay? Government's decision is so important because it affects all this, daily life of the citizen and also business activity of a company. So the decision of a government is so important. They should make a right decision. However, if you make a wrong decision, that's a worst case. Government intervention is not a must. Government just can make the market decide and step back aside and do nothing. That's okay. When market is operating good enough, then government doesn't have to intervene, right? So government decision in many cases is an intervention. Mostly in economics, it's a market intervention through regulation or government subsidy or tax or selection of a certain industry. Government decision is an intervention in the market, right? But the best way is good intervention by the government. They make a right decision. But the worst case is wrong intervention by the government. The second best is no intervention. Wrong intervention is worse than no intervention. Let me give you an example of each. Good intervention. 1971, Korean government had a big conference. And the president of Korea, then president, announced that Korea will select 5 industries for our national agenda. And these 5 industries will be given a lot of focus, and we will develop these 5. What are those 5 industries? Steel, chemical, shipbuilding, automobile, electronics. These 5 industries at the time of 71 was relatively challenging for Korea. Many international organizations try to stop us. Korea, you are not ready for those. Please try to work on your shoes. You are good at making shoes. And garment or textile, that's your strength. You are not ready for electronics. So it was very difficult to secure the fund for this because nobody tried to lend their money. But somehow we came up with these 5 industries and actually focused on these 5. You know what happened now? These 5 industries are taking up 70% of our export. And if you pick top 10 company as of 2011, because now it's a bit different, but as of 2011, all top 10 companies are coming from these 5 industries. So these 5 industries are really the backbone of Korean economy now. So selection of these 5 industries and making a national focus on these 5 was an excellent choice. There are some, of course, controversy there. Shouldn't the government make such a decision? Why is it the role of government to make such a decision? But back then, Korea did not have much, financial resources. We had to borrow money. So if we borrow money for, say, 50 industries, and each industry will have nuts, which will not be very much significant. That's why we had to make a focus, 5 industries, and make a focus on these 5. And these 5 industries, contrary to the worries of the international organization, are now the major industries of Korea. Of course, it's time for us to find something new, because shipbuilding going down, and also steel industry is going down, chemical stay stagnant, automobile, well, not bad, but it's challenging. Electronics, still fine. So this vacuum of steel and shipbuilding should be compensated by some new industry. We are looking for, say, energy, biotechnology, but it's time for Korea to set up a next generation of focus industry. But maybe the importance of government selection is not important anymore in Korea, because we have, it's that Samsung and Hyundai. They all have these worries all the time. What should be our focus industry now? So government doesn't have to really worry about that too much now. But back then, 70s, 60s and 70s, this selection was an excellent choice. Back in 70s again, Indonesia, then president of Indonesia announced that they will select, dozens of industries for national focus. They learned a lot from Korean experience. So let's do that. They selected aircraft industry as one of those focus industries. You know what happened? That was a really bad choice. They spent a lot of money in building up aircraft industry, not airline industry, but aircraft, aircraft industry. Failure after failure. They still have aircraft industry, but it's very, very, infant level. That's why, Indonesia is importing T-50 Korean aircraft now. But why did they choose aircraft industry for their focus industry? Because the one who made the decision, Minister for Science and Technology, was a chairman of Aerospace Indonesia. He chose his own industry. And he became a vice president. And later he even served as a president, although it was very short time. Mr. Habibi. He served as a Minister for Science and Technology for more than 15 years, and he chose his own company for the national focus. I don't think it was out of his concern for his national interest, but maybe his personal interest was involved there. So wrong intervention makes the worst possible scenario. Okay? Then how can we make the government make a right decision? Well, let's think about this soccer match. You have a penalty shootout, okay? One-on-one, the kicker and the goalkeeper. So what do you need to make a goal? What are the qualifications for a goal? First, intention to make a goal. If you don't have an intention for some reason, then there is no goal. Second, your ability to make a goal, right? Everybody has a good intention if you are a sportsman. But not everyone can make that goal. You need a competency. So making a right decision has 2 preconditions. One, good intention. The other, ability. Okay? In other words, clean government and competent government. I think these are 2 major pillars of government reform in any country. Okay? If you have reasonably clean government and reasonably good competency, then your government can make a right decision. Okay? Let's share a Korean experience. So clean government, competent government. What Korean government did to tackle these two problems? Now that's a very important point, because since Korean government tackled these two problems, Korean government was able to make a right decision, including selection of 5 industries. Okay? And since they made a right decision, economic growth was possible. Competent government. I will have to start with recruiting system. You need to have good people first. Okay? Smart people. Let me give you an example of, let me introduce Korea's bureaucracy. Korean bureaucracy has a 9-degree system. Level 1 is highest level. Level 9 is lowest. And above that, we have vice minister and minister. Okay? There are 3 entrance doors, level 5, 7, and 9. If you enter into the government through passing this level 9 exam, you probably end your career at level 5. It takes 30 years for a promotion. If you pass, you need to pass entrance exam. If you pass level 7 exam, and after 30 years, you probably finish your career at level 3 or level 4. From 5, maybe 1 or 2. That's your end point. Okay? But if you are smart and stay clean, there's a possibility for promotion. It's not a promotion because it's a political appointee. Okay? So specifically, it's not a promotion. The president selects 80% of vice minister from level 1 civil servant. That's the difference between Korea's bureaucracy and other countries. There is no other country that, not many countries, there are some, but there are very few countries in the world where your political appointees, such as ministers and vice ministers, are selected among civil servants. 80% of your vice ministers comes from level 1. And about 30% of ministers comes from vice minister. That means if you start from level 5, you have a good chance to become a minister. This is a huge difference compared to Korea and other countries. In Korea, if you pass level 5 exam, you can be a minister. There's a Korean saying that dragon comes from a creek. Small creek in a valley. Normally, dragon lives in a big river or lake. Dragon comes from a creek means be somebody from a just mediocre or poor family. Okay? There are many such cases. Because this level 5 exam does not require any schooling background. If you're a high school graduate and pass level 5, you start from 5. Do you have master's degree earned from KDI school? But if you pass level 9, you start from 9. We don't ask for your degree. We just ask for which exam you passed. If you pass level 9, you start from 9, regardless of your age, regardless of your schooling background. So anyone with smart brain and hard-working ethic, as soon as he passes level 5 exam, he can be a somebody. Level 5 is, relatively high position. And by the time he reaches around mid-50, he becomes assistant minister. And if he is hardworking and have good reputation, then you can be a vice minister and even a minister. So this is why Korea's civil servants stay clean and work hard. This is the difference between some civil servants in some developing country and Korea. They have different motivation. We selected, of course, the best people from this recruiting system, but at the same time, we gave them motivation to stay clean and hardworking. Many of those who pass a level 5 exam is the one who make that right decision in the right time during economic development history of Korea. They did not do that for national interest. They did it for their own personal interest to become somebody. But it was well aligned with national interest. Any question?
I was just going to comment that only is possible in the good government, which means, the government with the clean and transparent. And because dragon comes from a crate no longer applies to the current society.
Yeah, well, Korea has, the barriers are becoming higher and higher. That's true. That's a current problem. Okay, so we need to find a way to, having a better social ladder to go up to a higher strata of social class. But still, it is working. Level 5 exam is open to everyone. So as soon as you pass a level 5 exam, you can start from 5 and you can aim for minister. At least this channel is still alive. Yes. And so this system, this level 5 exam is very difficult. The difference is the level of difficulty. So everyone wants to pass level 5 rather than level 7. But level 7 is less difficult, and of course less difficult for level 9. If you pass level 5 exam during 60s and 70s, your parents back in the rural area have to kill a cow to throw a big feast for your village people. And your name will be posted outside of your high school. Jim Park has passed the level 5 exam. It's an honor for this high school. Yes. I'm from economics department of Seoul National University. My classmates, the best performer, either go to the US for a PhD or they took this exam. So they are currently this range. One of them is vice minister, and some of them, mostly they are level 2, but so they are now this range. Okay. So having a right motivation, select the good people and give them a right motivation. That was very, very useful scheme in Korea. Okay. And also, we established a training center, and civil servants were appointed to the minister. That's very important. Yes. So having a good motivation, that really differentiated Korean civil servants from other, civil servants in other country. And also, as a member of KDI, I'll have to comment on the role of KDI a little bit, because Korea's bureaucracy is very unique because we don't have R&D division in the government. We don't have research division in government. Instead, they establish government-funded research institute like KDI. So they needed academic support, but they couldn't find any good economist. So they established KDI, but not many good economists in Korea. So they try to find people outside. Many Korean economists who are working in IMF and World Bank in the universities in the USA refuse to come back because this country can offer only small amount of wage. The salary level is too low. They had a much better life in the USA. Therefore, the Korean government established KDI and offer salary 3 times higher than the university professor, big apartment, big office, the rent-free apartment, a car with a chauffeur. Can you believe that? Huh? Car with a chauffeur for a young PhD, yes? 2 research assistants, 1 secretary. This whole package was given for one single, PhD, and we had 13 members secured under the leadership of Kim Man-jae, who later became a deputy prime minister. And also, that was same thing was done for KIST, Science and Technology, and KDI. This sounds easy, but in fact it is not. This is absolutely not easy. Based on the KDI's experience, we are establishing MDI in Myanmar, Myanmar Development Institute. And we argue that MDI has to offer a huge salary, but their government. So it's very difficult to offer such a huge package in developing country? Because there is a jealousy. You know, jealousy is one of the fundamental feeling of human being. How can you persuade your insiders? You know, why those people in KDI? Why these university professors are not paid the same? You know, there is so much such criticism, so it wasn't easy. But you know, somehow, based on strong will of KDI, the president of Korea then, the President Park even donated his 1 month of salary to KDI, you know, to make other people shut up. You know, you know, this is my, you know, interest in this organization. So don't talk about that anymore. You know, that was his behavior to show his determination. But it's very difficult to attract such, you know, commitment of a leader. Without such strong commitment of a leader, a car with a chauffeur will be impossible. But of course, this is a story of 70s. There is nothing like that these days. You know, salary not very different from the other university professor. Well, we have still a good office, but no rent-free apartment. A rent-free apartment for international faculty member. I can understand that. Or young young faculty who joined recently, not people like me. Car with a chauffeur, unthinkable. One research assistant and 1/3 of secretary. We share a secretary. So, you know, this is a good old days, you know, story, just passed down verbally by my ancestor. Okay. So my point is, you know, when there's a need for the support, government should do something about, to have this competency. You know, KIST and KDI supported the government decision. When government came up with selection of 5 industry, KIST offered the opinion from the science and technology point of view, and KDI offered the economist point of view. So this selection of 5 industries was not done by the president himself alone. It is a joint decision, you know, based on all this advice from these researchers who were enjoying this huge package. Okay, so but you know, I visited many developing countries, but they were very hesitant in offering such package to their researcher. They say that it should be equal to civil servants. You know, in Myanmar, the average monthly salary of a director general is this level, so pretty high level. $500 per month. And can you attract the research economists who are working in World Bank for that $500, you know, per month? Never. Second, clean government. How can you make the government clean? Of course, we need to have a relatively clean top leader. You know, then President Park was relatively clean. Was he clean because he was a good man? Well, could be, but I think there is more than that. 1 year before his military coup, he became a president after he, was successful in military coup. But 1 year before his military coup, we had a April 19th revolution. It is a citizens' movement. With all college students and citizens participated in a huge street rally, which made then president, the previous dictator, step down. So Korean people are really hard to rule. You know, when they feel unsatisfied, they go out to the street and make their president step down. That's what we do. And yes, so we had such experience in 1960, 1 year before President Park. So President Park witnessed what happened a year ago. He witnessed his predecessor, former president, had to step down because of this student demonstration. So there is a constant pressure upon the President Park's shoulder. If I screw up my policy, these people will storm into the street and shout against me. Maybe then I will have to step down again. So this pressure makes him make a right decision. Okay? So I always, so this is like, saying to my African students or a student from dictatorship say that you have to participate in the street demonstration. But I'm not saying that. But my point is, do you have an experience of citizen revolution in your history in your history? If you have that, it has some influence on your president. But if you don't have that, your president may be a little bit more relaxed. Okay? So that's one aspect. Second, separation between political and economic power. What is the case in your country? The one with political power in your country and the one with economic power, money, are the same or they are separated. I'm talking about huge money, not just good money, but the huge money. Are they also politically strong? In Korea, historically, especially back then, 60s and 70s, there is a clear separation between the one with political power, the one with economic power. You know what the President Park did right after his military coup in 1961? He became a dictator after a military coup. And the first thing he did, surprisingly, he arrested the chairman of big conglomerates. Hyundai chairman, Samsung chairman. Samsung chairman ran away to Japan to avoid arrest for tax evasion. But the President Park did not like the private company who were enjoying easy money of, import license. They get an import license and buy things from outside and sell inside. Easy money. So President Park released all their people upon the promise that they will invest in Korea rather than enjoying import license. But I'm not saying that you have to arrest your businessmen. My point is that clearly shows political power and economic power were separated. We have two different groups. Okay? What are the entities that political power and economic power are integrated? What are the such example? That's state-owned enterprise. State-owned enterprise, there is a money and also there is a political power. Okay? So state-owned enterprise is an arena where political power and economic powers are combined. So when you have many state-owned enterprises, there will be huge corruptions. You have to privatize them. Privatization means separation of political power and economic power. But in many developing countries that I visited, well, I have to take an example of Guatemala. I know that there is no one from Guatemala in this room. This country has huge collusion among the money and politics. I was invited by the Guatemalan government, and they asked me to come up with focus industry of Guatemala. Okay? I interviewed many people. What do you think is the future focus industry of Guatemala? I interviewed businessmen, politicians, and civil servants, and even the professors. Answers were the same. Coffee, banana, sugarcane. Can you believe that? Do you think that Guatemala can be a developed country by focusing on sugarcane, coffee, and banana? I didn't believe so. Of course, they have wonderful banana, sugarcane, and coffee. Their coffee is excellent, really. But I don't think they could become an advanced country with these three industries. But why they are suggesting the same old industry to me? I realized that by the time I left this country. In this country, these three industries major industry in Guatemala, and they are providing huge political money. And then many of them are politicians, in fact. And they are utilizing very low wage. If there is a new industries coming up, the wage may go up. So they don't want to see something new. They are very happy as they are. If there is a new industry, government subsidy will may go to that new industries, and workers will migrate to this new industry, which will enhance the level of wage, which are bad news. So that's why all the people in Guatemala emphasizing these three old industries to me. Of course, I suggested some totally different industry. But I really realized that, this huge collusion among politicians and businessmen and even the academians are so outstanding in this country. So if you have that in your country, that's something you have to really tackle. Because if there is no such separation, corruption is hard to be identified. When they are separated, as a politician, I will have to persuade this businessman. And also the businessmen will have to persuade the politicians or civil servants. There should be a transaction of money. They'll have to give me a bribe. And I have to do something good for a favorable thing to them. So there is a transaction of money and favor. Sometimes it is seen. Okay? When there's a transaction, it is observable. But when this decision is done within state-owned enterprise, there is no such transaction. So corruption is not even identified. That's why you have to separate political and economic power. Once they are separated, of course they can make a collusion and corruption, but there is a transaction of money, which can be observable sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes it is observable. Third way is competition. Well, when Korea selected, say, electronic industry, Korea selected several companies in the electronic business. Who are going to do electronic business? Many hands up. Okay, Samsung, Daewoo, and LG. You do the business in this playground. Okay, so 3 companies were selected, along with the small minor ones. So major 3 companies were selected. So they were producer of electronic devices in Korea. There's a competition. When there's a competition, corruption is more difficult. Why? Because if I give a special favor for Samsung, because Samsung gave me a huge bribe, as a decision maker, I did something good for Samsung. Who will complain about that? Yeah, LG, of course. Competitor of Samsung. Competitor of Samsung Electronics, LG Electronics, will always try to observe what is going on between government and the Samsung. Why are they offering favoritism all the time to Samsung? The LG will complain about that. So when there is a competition, there is a complaint. When there is a corruption, okay? So that's why you have to bring competition. Why state-owned enterprise is not good? Because there is no competition for state-owned enterprise. They are monopolists in many of the cases. And I already talked about these incentives for civil servants. They try to become a minister. They try to stay clean. Of course, Korean CIA was also very keen about this bad behavior of corruption. So these are the major reasons why Korea was able to make a right decision, although there was some corruption. There was a corruption, of course. I'm sure that when Korean government selected 5 industries, they must have given some bribe. I'm pretty sure about that. And when Samsung and the LG and Daewoo were selected for supplier of electronic industry, there must have been some bribe too. However, at least we maintain the separation and competition. So although there was some bribe, government should have made a right decision. If they made a wrong decision, competitor made a, had something about it, and the president had to think about his responsibility. He is worried about another citizens' movement, and he has to be fair about, for the different companies. If he give a special favor for Samsung only, LG and other companies will complain about that. So, that's why Korean government tried to make a right decision, despite there was a corruption. Okay? So it's very difficult to clear all the corruption out of your government. Corruption will be there. However, the bottom line is, does your government make a right decision? That's bottom line. Okay? As long as they are making the right decision, such corruption is of course not good, but it's not so detrimental for your growth. You can live with such, crime or such corruption, as long as it does not distort major decision. Okay. Third, adequate intervention. But government should not intervene too much. Okay. This is a problem we have right now. Up to this point, I said that Korean government did something good. They did something good for the economic development. But this is our current problem. This is our most needed reform in Korean government as of now. Korean government has a good memory of good intervention. Korean government intervened in the economy right way, in the right time. They know that. So good memory is lingering in their mind. Oh, we made a right decision in the past. So they think that government intervention is still effective. They believe so, which is totally not the case. This country is not the country of during 60s anymore. But this government is, thinks that they are in 70s and 80s. So they intervene too much. There are still many state-owned enterprises. There are strong regulation. And there are too much support for the small and medium-sized enterprise. Do you know who is Peter Pan? Yeah, it's a little boy, kid's story. Who is Peter Pan's friend? Wendy or Tinkerbell, depending on the definition of your friend. Peter Pan never grow old, right? When he comes back, Wendy became a mid-aged lady, but Peter Pan was the same 10-year-old boy. So Peter Pan syndrome means you don't want to grow. You want to stay a small boy, like small and medium-sized enterprise in Korea. They don't want to grow bigger. Why? Because they will help less. Government supports small and medium-sized company too much, so they are so much supported by the government. They are happy in the arms of their parents. So if they get old, maybe their parents will say, oh, you should become independent. No, mommy, I don't want to get old. I want to live in your house. I'm 40 years old, but still I'm living in your country. That's what we do in Korea. Small and medium-sized enterprise in Korea don't want to grow bigger. Too much support. Zombie company. Do you know what is zombie? No, zombie is the living dead. You should be dead, but after the sunset, they walk around. Like a Korean business. Many Korean companies are zombie companies. They should have been dead, but they are alive. Why? By the injection of medicine called government subsidy. Government should let them die, but government gave them an injection. Please stay alive. I don't want you to die because the jobs will go down. You have to maintain your job. So please stay alive. You know what? What happens if you are bitten by zombie? you become a zombie too, right? When there are many zombie companies, other companies become zombie. Why? Because zombie companies participated in the competitive bidding by lower price. So, because in order to stay alive, they apply with a very low price, blocking other companies' opportunity. So they are making other companies zombie too. How many zombie companies in Korea? Among small and medium-sized enterprise, 1 out of 3 companies are zombie. What do you mean by zombie? Zombie company means you don't pay your interest payment with your business, with your profit. If you cannot pay your interest with your profit, what do you have to do? You go either bankrupt or you have to borrow more money, right? That means you will have more interest payment next year. So if you cannot pay your interest payment with your profit, you are in financially very serious situation. If you are in this situation 3 years in a row, we call it a zombie company. There are 1 out of 3 companies are zombie. Is a problem of small and medium-sized company only? No. For a big company too. 1 out of 4 big companies are zombie in Korea. Why? Because they should not, because they don't die. Government saved them too much. Okay? Well, temporarily it is painful because there will be a loss of jobs and there is a declining in your national output. But when you do not let a dying company die, if you save them, there will be no market pressure. Oh, the government will save me again anyhow. I don't have to be efficient. You know, they will save out my company anyway. They will lose this market principle. So too much government support is really detrimental to the sound market economy. Okay? Korean government is too generous parents. Of course, it is the hope of many youngsters. You know, if your father told one day, come to my son or daughter, I'll give you $10,000 every year until I die. What a nice parents you have, right? But you will stop studying from that time on, right? So the parents should be, you know, harsh in a way. If not, your kids will just, you know, rely on you until, you know, they are 40 or 50. But Korean government is too generous father. You know, because they are nice? No, they enjoy that. It's a source of their power. It's not for people's benefit. It's for their own benefit. Because providing money to private company is a source of their power. They say thank you to you. Sometimes more than verbally. So, you know, providing such a fund is not for national interest. It's a ministry's interest. They are doing for their own good. Maybe it can secure their, you know, life retirement job in the private sector. This is something that Korean government needs to reform now. Okay? You know, somehow we have solved number 1 problem, you know, clean government issue. You know, not totally, but you know, somehow we control clean government issue. Competent government issue, yeah, I think we control that. Korean civil servants are, you know, pretty competent, I think. But this one, adequate intervention. This is something that we have to, you know, tackle. This is most serious problem that Korean government now has. But nobody thinks that this is a problem because zombies are happy. You know, because government gives them money. So zombies are so happy. They are beneficiary of this wrong, too much intervention. And Peter Pan too. Peter Pan is so happy. They don't want to get old. And the government is happy because it is a source of their power. Nobody is saying this is a problem. That's why I talk about this all the time through news media and in the conference. I always say that to the civil servants all the time. That's, I think, the role of the professors, because I will not fired anyway. Okay, so there are three directions of government reform. Adequate size of government role. This is what Korea definitely needs. And a cleaner government and more competent government. These three reforms has to be done together. Okay? Please try to apply what I have said to your own government. What does your government need for cleaner government, for more competent government, and for more adequate intervention? But can we expect that our government will do these three reforms voluntarily? Never. They will never do it voluntarily. Because corruption, they enjoy corruption, so no government official wants to live in a clean government. Competent government is also very painful because you have to work all the time. You have to train yourself. It's not, unless it is well compensated, it's a painful process to stay competent. Adequate size of government role, in other words, reducing the role of government is also painful. Who do you want? Anyone? Is there anyone who wants to reduce your role? I don't want to reduce my role as a father or as my role as a professor. Nobody wants to reduce your role, right? My government is the same. They don't want to reduce their role. Although they are doing too much, they still want to maintain their role, just like myself. So, no reform will be possible voluntarily. Okay? You cannot just expect their goodwill for this reform. What do you need then? Reformer. You need reformer. Okay? That's why we need a good strategy. But reform is a very difficult process. This is my own experience. Korean railway system was run by civil servants, okay, back then. Now it is run by state-owned enterprise. I'm the one who changed the government body to state-owned enterprise. I thought the general public will support me because the price will be lowered, I believed, and service will be improved. However, the citizens did not even know that I'm doing this for them. They didn't even know. And even though they knew it, citizens are not organized. They don't gather in the Gwanghwamun Street, in the square, in Gwanghwamun Square in downtown Seoul, and say, well, Jin Park is doing the right thing, let him do what he wants. They never do that. And they don't know the gain they will enjoy. And they are not organized. However, labor union in the railway system, they know that they lose their government official status. They become member of state-owned enterprise. So what happened to my civil servant's pension? What about my job security till 60 years old? Small number, only 30,000 people, well organized, hostile to me. That's why they are gathering in front of my building and have a white band around their forehead and shouting, "Jinpa, go to hell. You're a bad guy." I was doing something for the citizen, but I don't have any support from the citizen. Only hostility. That's the fate of a reformer. Reformer has no friends, only enemies. Okay, so no friends around, only enemies. That's the inevitable fate of a reformer. That's why we have to support reformer. Is there anyone around you who are trying to reform your own organization or country? Please support them. They are lonely. Okay? And reform in the public sector is much more difficult than reform in, say, Samsung. If Samsung chairman says, "Oh, I don't like this. Please change this. Could you?" Maybe within a week it will be changed. And President Moon of Korea said, oh, please change this, could you? Maybe it will take 2 years, or maybe it will be working because this is the beginning of his presidency. But if he says that 4 years later, 1 year before his term, then civil servants will say, oh, okay, Mr. President, we will do. This is what they do. Stay calm, do nothing. Because they can wait 1 year, then new president comes in. Okay? So public sector reform is so difficult. Because Samsung, the crown, is given to the son. But President Moon never do that. We are living in a democracy. So we have all the changing leadership all the time. Okay? But in Samsung, it's a lifelong leadership. Even his son will succeed to his crown. And there are many other reasons, And also, civil servants, status will be guaranteed. Lifelong employment, like myself. But, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. Tenure, in KDI school, that was the best day of my life. Oh, I'm finally get tenure. Because in this academic institution, once in a while, the professor their contract is expired because they don't meet the minimum research requirement. So it's very common. Generally, every 3 years, one professor is expired. So very competitive organization we have in KDI school. More than 50% of my annual salary depends on my performance. My research output, even the students' evaluation is reflected in my salary. So more than 50%. There is no school like this in Korea. Maybe not even in any country. More than 50%. So the highest salary is for late 40s. Early 50. They are enjoying the highest salary. I went over this peak, I think I'm on my downturn. So reform is very difficult, but somehow KDI school reformed this organization, so we're a very competitive organization. But public sector reform is very difficult. Everyone enjoys lifetime employment, so if they do not comply to the leaders in it driving for reform, nothing will happen. Because they will maintain their job until 60. So government reform requires a strong support from the political leader. There are two types of reform. Reform from outside. This outside means outside of your organization. A reform initiated by someone else outside of your organization. Or voluntary reform. Which do you think is more effective? Outside? Well, there are positive and negative aspects in here. Voluntary reform has more feasibility, but fundamental reform will never take place under voluntary reform. Do you want to fundamentally reform yourself? Probably not. Maybe you feel a need for that, but you will have a hard time in implementing your willingness, right? It's very difficult to fundamentally reform oneself. I know that I have to reduce my wine intake. I drink a half bottle of wine every day. Well, there will be okay alcohol intake for an adult by WHO. I consider it my Bible. 50 cc, 50 grams of alcohol per day for male adult is fine. Not fine, but it's acceptable. And that's half bottle is about that. But I know that I have to reduce my wine intake every day. Half bottle, maybe a third of bottle. But it's very difficult to do that. Maybe I need outsider reformer. maybe my doctor, maybe. But I'm healthy enough to go on my habit. There is a Korean saying that a Buddhist monk cannot have his hair cut with his own hands. Have you ever tried having your hair cut with your own hands? It's very difficult to do that. So this is a Korean saying that you cannot solve your own problem. Okay? Because you don't want to solve your own problem. It's very difficult to solve your own problem. And we need a barber. Okay? So we need outside reformer. Do you have outside reformer in your government? In other words, is there any government branch in your country whose job is to reform other ministry? They don't have any other job to do. The only job for them is to reform other organizations. Do you have that kind of organization in your country? Yes? Please, could you introduce the name of the organization? Tell me when you come to mind.
The name is how to say this administration is the party's administration. We call it the enhanced reforming small leader group. Small leader group. From the central government to the provincial government and city government.
Okay.
At 3 level, we have the organization called the enhanced the reforming leader small group.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. Well, for those who understand Chinese, you may address the name in Chinese too.
生怕改革领导小组委员会。
Okay. I don't understand Chinese, but for those who understand Chinese. Any other, please? Well, for Korean students, you don't have to answer because we don't have one. Any other? Normally, yes? You have any? Oh, no? Well, when you have already well-established government who are efficient, hardworking, competent, then probably you don't need such organization. But if you still have many things to reform for your government, you need to have one. You need to have a separate ministry whose job is to reform other organizations. My organization was just like that. My Ministry of Planning and Budget, we have 3 offices. Office of Planning, Office of Budget, Office of Government Reform. I was in this Government Reform office. And I was a level 4 director. If you remember the hierarchy, I was a level 4. And, I was relatively young. It was 18 years ago. I was 18 years younger than now. Oh, that was my first, because I was a contract-based civil servant. Well, for level 5, 7, 9, we have to go through exam. But for a contract-based civil servant, there is no exam. We only have an interview. So I had an interview and have a 3-year contract. I work as a director. So I didn't go through an exam. 18 years ago, I was one of the youngest director in Korean government, full of energy and ideas, and I was really worked hard. Many failure too, but some success as well. My organization was Ministry of Planning and Budget. My office was Government Reform Office. This office was led by Assistant Minister. Okay. We have assistant. My boss was one Director General and Assistant Minister. And then, of course, we have a Minister and Vice Minister and Minister. And my organization, I didn't have any job. My job was to reform Ministry of Construction and Transportation, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. That was my job. I don't have any other things to do. My job was to reform these 4 ministries. So every time I go to my office, I have to think about how can I justify my salary? What should I do this month? Because there is no assignment. I have to find out my own job. So in that respect, I was like a hunter rather than a farmer. Farmer, they know what they have to do in a year. They know every month they know what they have to do. And they have their own territory. They don't cultivate others' farm. They only cultivate their own farmyard. But I was hunter. I always travel other ministry. I never stay in, not physically, but I always have to think about other ministries' area. What is their problem? I have to try to watch all the time and come up with an idea. Integration of land corporation and housing corporation. Corporatization of railway system in the government. The integration of Ministry of Construction and Transportation with Ministry of Maritime Affairs. Like this. Anything that I come up with, I will make a report and report to my Director General and Assistant Minister. Some steps to go, of course. And then they say, good idea. Then I can push my agenda. And of course, they don't like my idea. It's my job. Why are you interfering in my own business? Then I say, well, that's my own job too, to interfere in you. That's my job. Do you see in this law, the Government Reform Office is supposed to reform other ministry. Then I say, I know Ministry of Construction and Transportation. I know that you have land corporation, housing corporation, and I think that they should be integrated. It should be better to integrate these two. Why? I have 2 kids. Why my 2 kids should be integrated? I love them as they are, independently. Because of these reasons. They wouldn't listen to me. Then I reported it to my minister. And my minister called the budget office, budget office. And the budget office says, Ministry of Construction and Transportation would not listen to your advice. Then tell them that maybe they have to worry about their budget next year. Because we have a budget office right next to us. So using this budget power as my pistol hidden in my pocket, I threatened other ministry all the time. Do you know what happened when you do not listen to my... Do you know what is in here? I have more than my handkerchief in here. And yes, so that's how I worked. But the beauty of my organization was that I did not have any other job to do. Nothing. Sometimes, of course, minister gave me an order. Director Park, I think you have to do this because I have an information from somewhere that the ministry you are dealing with has this problem. Then, then sometimes it is given by my minister. But sometimes, most of the agenda is developed from my side. So, to me, I can be idling. I can do nothing. Because if I do not find my own agenda, I can just do nothing. But of course, I was a contract-based civil servant. I had to prove myself for 3 years. So I could try to identify the problem of these 4 ministries that I dealt with. Of course, they hated me. But it's okay to fight against with other people over business issue. As long as you do not hurt their personal feeling, it's okay to fight with them because they understand too. It's not personal fight. It's a organization to organization fight. But of course, I never give up easily. But that was the beauty. No job else to do. So your reformer should not have any other responsibility except reforming other ministry. That's the most important qualification of this reformer organization. My organization is no longer, does not exist any longer. They abolished this office because it was hated by all other ministries. So the government reform function is shifted to Ministry of Interior. But Ministry of Interior, their job was to, they have a bureau there, they have office whose job is to deal with the organization. Do you have your organization properly? They evaluate other organizations. So they thought it is okay to link this evaluation function with organization evaluation with government reform. But when they have other things to do, government reform was forgotten all the time. On your table, you have two things at the same time. Important business, urgent business. If you have two things to do on your table, which one will you do first? Urgent one, important one. Urgent one, of course. Because if you don't do, this is urgent by definition. You have to do this. It doesn't matter whether it is important or not. Although it is not important, since it is urgent, you have to do this. But reform is never urgent. Because if you don't reform, current status will prevail. Right? So if you have urgent thing and important thing to do, important thing such as reform will be forgotten all the time. So government reform function is shifted to the other ministry now. It is all forgotten. There is no such function such as government reform in Korea. We have to revive this function. All ministries are, to me, has so many problems. We have to revive this government reform office again. And another beauty of my organization was combination of civil servants and contract-based civil servants like me. Under this government reform office, there were 4 directors. I was one of the 8 directors. But 4 directors were contract-based civil servants. They passed the level 5 exam. They are very smart people. The 4 directors from private sector. Me from KDI, public accountant, consultant, and lawyer, and professors. So 4 people came from private sector and appointed to a director. So these 4 and 4 were put together under the government reform office. They were very different, very, very different. These 4, relatively older, generally 5 to 10 years older than these groups. Much more experienced. They know government much better. However, they have friends in other ministry because they were in the government. They have been in the government and they will stay in the government until their retirement. So they don't want to do something bad for other ministry. If they did something uncomfortable for other ministry, well, what if I left this government reform office? I will have some business relationship with other ministry, and if I did something uncomfortable for them, they will be, they will retaliate sometime in the future. So to me, these 4, experienced but slow, not very hardworking. They do not identify reform agenda much. But these 4, active, try to find the new agenda all the time. However, inexperienced. Try to aim too much, over-ambitious. So mixing these 4 was excellent combination. I met these 4 guys. They were already retired, and many of them finished their career at the vice minister level, and they now left the government. And later they told me, "Oh, Professor Park, well, because of your active, hardworking, we were so much pressurized. When you are making so much new agenda all the time, it was a big pressure for us. But I think it is a good pressure. But at the same time, I told them, because of your experience, I really learned a lot. It's not out of my, it's not just compliment. It's really from bottom of my heart. I learned a lot from them. Their experience really helped me. So if you have a new reform organization, mix people, insider plus outsider. Because insider, they don't reform their own organization much. It applies to organization level too, not only the country level. Maybe you are coming from a certain organization or certain university. Then do you want to reform your organization? And please have a unit whose role is to reform your organization. There should be no other responsibility. Okay? And mix people in this unit. Only insiders in here, they will not do much. As my 4 civil servants director. You have to mix people, insider and outsider. Outsiders' energy and their active working spirit should be coupled with experienced, insider. So that's how you make your reformer. So best strategy is have a good reformer. That's the first step towards government reform. Okay, finally, this is what Machiavelli said. I love his the book. He said, "Innovator makes enemies of all those who prosper under the old order, and only lukewarm support is forthcoming from those who prosper under the new." This is exactly the case of the Korean Railway. Okay, the citizens do not support you, but those who lose their vested interest will be an enemy of the reformer. Okay. Thank you very much. And yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So if I summarize my talk, you have to make your government make a right decision. In order to make your right decision, you have to make your government clean and competent. In order to make your government clean, you have to make your civil servants motivated to be clean. In Korea, we make clean civil servants a minister. That's why they try to stay clean, make a right decision. And you have to make your government competent. In Korea, in order to make the civil servants competent, we went through a very tough competitive exam. If you pass that exam, you considered a smart person. Okay? So having a right civil servant through a good recruiting process was very important for Korea. And in order to reduce the corruption, you have to bring a competition, and also separation between political and economic power is important. That's why privatization of state-owned enterprise is important. But this is about intervention of the government, but government may want to expand their role too much. They may intervene too much. So you should control too much expansion of government role. Adequate intervention by the government is important. But they will not reduce their role voluntarily. How can we reduce their role? You need a reformer. Reformer should focus on reform. There should be no other job to do. Only reform. And you should mix insider, outsider in that reform organization. Okay? That's all I want to say. So let's go back to our first slide. Okay, are you able to answer this question better? 90 minutes ago. Please compare yourself 90 minutes ago and now in answering this question. Okay, that's what you earned from this 90 minutes. Okay, any question? Yes?
So I have a question about the SOEs in South Korea. So actually from this slide, it seems that but as we know that the big companies like Samsung and this company is a private company, it's not SOEs. So maybe the state there are some stock shares from the government in this big company, but it's also public and private company. As SOEs, you call it some companies is the only big company and the Peter Pan company. But if it's not a big company, why the local government want to keep this company still alive by didn't let them break up?
Because
it's just simple for the create job.
Yeah, that's the most important. Yeah, job creation, and also maybe there could be corruption too. You know, a private company wants to stay alive, so corruption is cheaper for them. But you know, the government has a cost of maintaining the employment, so that's the most important reason. And Korean government privatized many of state-owned enterprises starting from 1960. So Samsung, I talked about 5 industries, but electronics and automobile has started with the private company. We did not have any state-owned enterprise in electronics and automobile. And steel industry started with state-owned, but they bring competition by inviting private supplier, and they privatized state-owned enterprise. It was the case for steel, shipbuilding, and chemical. Shipbuilding, steel, and chemical, they started with state-owned enterprise, and they bring private sector, and then they privatize state-owned enterprise. So that's how we did for this steel, shipbuilding, and chemical. But automobile and electronics, we did not have any experience of state-owned enterprise. It was all started with private sector. Okay, other question? Okay, I think I should have secured more time for Q&A, but since you have wonderfully participated in the class discussion, I think we have created wonderful harmony, wonderful concerto. May not be a symphony, but a good concerto together. I would like to pay my appreciation and also gratitude and also respect for all your active participation. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.